I thought I'd give you a little background before I get to the main thing so you can understand my situation better. I've been married to Mark for about 6 years now. We met in high school and have been together ever since. When we first got together, things were pretty amazing. Mark is one of those guys who goes all out for his partner. He's incredibly romantic and always thoughtful. We had a great start to our relationship. Our relationship and life together felt like a fairy tale. I won't go into too many details about us for privacy reasons, but Mark earns really well and is the primary breadwinner in our household. I have a job, but it's more of a passion project than a necessity. I work because I enjoy it and it keeps me busy, but it doesn't compare to Mark's income, so while I do contribute financially, it's not a major part. Initially, our finances were in order and our relationship was going well. Mark was always surprising me with romantic gestures, and we enjoyed each other's company. However, as time went on, things started to change. The excitement began to fade, and we found ourselves growing apart. It wasn't immediate, but over time the spark that once made our relationship so vibrant began to dim. As time went on, I started to feel a growing sense of boredom and restlessness in my relationship with Mark. Even though he was still the same old romantic person he'd always been, pouring his love and attention into our relationship, I found myself drifting further away. Mark was still incredibly affectionate and thoughtful, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Mark and I we'd been together since high school, and he was essentially my first and only serious relationship. We grew up together and he'd been my rock through so many stages of life, but I couldn't help but wonder what life might be like if I'd explored more. The thought stayed in the back of my mind and started to consume more of my attention. I loved Mark deeply, but the spark that once made our relationship so vibrant, I wasn't uninterested in Mark or ungrateful for what he did for me. It was more about the sense of familiarity and lack of excitement that had begun to set in. The excitement that was once in our relationship had faded, and I was starting to have a nagging curiosity about what else was out there. Mark and I just had too much familiarity. I started to question if I was missing out on something. I was looking for experiences that would make me feel more alive and fulfilled. Despite my love for Mark, I felt like I was stuck in a room. The idea of exploring beyond our marriage started to seem more appealing. As I said before, Mark and I had been together since high school. We had spent a significant portion of our lives growing up together. He was the only person I had ever been with. I felt like I needed something different. And that's when I met Vince. I met him at the gym and we hit it off. I didn't have many friends, so I was eager to make a new one. We started chatting and we immediately began talking a lot. Mark even started noticing that I was always on my phone, always chatting with Vince. I became more protective and secretive about my phone. I'm surprised Mark didn't call me out or confront me about it sooner. Vince and I had such a connection, things just flowed easily between us. We chatted for a while, and then started hanging out, not just at the gym but after grabbing drinks or going to the movies. We spent more and more time together outside of our usual gym routine. We had this connection that I can't fully explain. I know the comments will probably be harsh, but in the beginning it felt like we were soulmates or something. It was so natural, like we were meant to be. The more we hung out, the closer we got. Eventually one day while I was at Vince's house watching a movie, we finally crossed the boundaries we had promised ourselves we wouldn't. We slept together. I know I was wrong, I cheated. I've told myself that 1,000,000 times and I regret everything. But after that, Vince and I started having an affair. I didn't feel the same familiarity with Vince that I always felt with Mark, and that was exhilarating. It didn't take long before Vince started showing his true colors. He became extremely possessive, to an almost unhealthy degree. I told myself that 1,000,000 times and I regret everything, but after that, Vince and I started having an affair. Honestly, I loved how exciting it was. It felt like a spark had been reignited in me. I didn't feel the same familiarity with Vince that I always felt with Mark, and that was exhilarating. But it didn't take long before Vince started showing his true colors. He became extremely possessive, to an almost unhealthy level. He even started making some pretty absurd demands, like insisting that I stop being intimate with my husband. He wanted me to distance myself from Mark and push me to prioritize him over my marriage. Vince was always seeking validation, asking me over and over if he was better than Mark. It was like he had this weird obsession with competing with Mark, even though they'd never met. At first I found it flattering, but it quickly became suffocating. His possessiveness was kind of flattering at first. I thought it was cute, and a twisted way of showing he cared, but over time it became suffocating and infuriating. He was always looking for some sort of confirmation from me. He would talk down about my husband constantly, and needed me to assure him that he was the better man. I stupidly fed into his ego, telling him what he wanted to hear. I thought it was harmless, and that Mark would never know, so what was the harm? But then Vince came up with the idea of the prank call. One day while I was with Vince, he came up with the idea of playing a prank on Mark. At first I wasn't really interested. I thought it was childish and cruel, but Vince was becoming more and more controlling. Vince started threatening me with telling Mark about our affair if I didn't do things his way. I felt trapped. I didn't want to upset Vince because I feared what he might do, so I reluctantly went along with it. He made me give him Mark's personal number. I remember hesitating, feeling a pit in my stomach, but Vince was insistent. He dialed Mark's number, and when Mark picked up the phone, Vince faked this exaggerated high-pitched laugh. Vince was using a low-pitched voice to pretend to be Mark's late mother. Mark had just lost his mom a few months back, so this would have been a really emotional blow for him. But Vince didn't care. He thought it was hilarious. He started talking as if he were Mark's mom, calling from heaven, saying ridiculous things and laughing the whole time. Mark quickly realized it was a prank and hung up. But I could only imagine how hurt he must have been. Vince kept laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. It was the funniest thing in the world, but I felt horrible. I knew it was crossing a line. Mark had been distant from me for a while, especially after my affair started. I could tell he was hurting in more ways than one. Losing his mom was a big blow, and I hadn't been there for him in the I should have realized. We'd grown so distant that I couldn't even remember the last time we'd shared a moment of intimacy, or said, I love you to each other. I'd built up so many walls around me that I'd shut him out entirely. I thought the prank would be a one-off. I thought it was just a stupid, cruel prank that would be forgotten in time. Nothing seemed to come of it. I tried to push the guilt aside and continue with my life, but Vince's behavior only got worse. He became even more possessive, constantly demanding my attention and validation. He was asking for money, and threatening to expose our affair to Mark if I didn't give it to him. I felt trapped, and like I had no way out. I couldn't believe how far things had spiraled out of control, but I didn't know how to fix it. Then, a few days ago, everything came crashing down. I'd gone to hang out with Vince, but when I got back home, I found all my things dumped on the front porch. I was really shocked and upset. I called Mark and he came outside, but only to take the car key from me. He didn't say much, just that we were done and getting a divorce. He told me I could go be with Vince since I apparently cared. I learned more about him. His words cut deep, and I instantly felt the gravity of what I'd done. I started crying and begging him not to end things. I didn't want to be with Vince anymore. He was controlling and manipulative. Honestly, I was terrified of him. If it weren't for the fact that he was blackmailing me, I would have ended things a long time ago. If it weren't for the fact that he was blackmailing me, I would have ended things a long time ago. I had wandered outside of my marriage, thinking I'd find something more exciting, something that would make me feel alive again, but instead I found myself in a nightmare. I realized that what I had with Mark was far more valuable than anything Vince could offer. I loved Mark, but I was foolish to let my boredom and Vince's manipulative behavior get in the way of that. I begged Mark to take me back, but he wouldn't listen. He told me it was over for good, and that I had betrayed him in the worst possible way. I was devastated and desperate. I called. Vince thought he might be able to pick me up, but when I told him what had happened, he just laughed and hung up on me. I was completely alone with nowhere to go. I ended up calling a friend I hadn't spoken to in a long time. She agreed to let me stay at her place for a week while I figure things out. I've been trying to work out what to do for the last few days, but time is running out. I wasn't prepared for what happened, and I know I made a mistake. I did something terrible, but is there any way to save my marriage? Can Mark ever forgive me? I knew there'd be some backlash, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't see this coming. Reddit can be brutal, and now I've experienced that firsthand. I've gotten a lot of DMs and comments, some of them pretty horrible. At this point, there's nothing I haven't heard, but I guess it's fine, I deserve it. This update doesn't really have a proper update. I'm mostly just using it as a way to vent because I'm so tired. How does your life go from being decent to a complete disaster in literal weeks? One moment I was in my home with my husband, my life seemingly stable albeit with a few cracks. I tried to ignore it, but everything fell apart. As I said in my last post, I had been staying with a friend who said she could only accommodate me for a week. I thought that was fine at the time, but it's been more than a week, and she's kicked me out. Now I'm couch surfing when I can find a place. I've even ended up staying at homeless shelters. It's a real shock to the system. I've lost my job and my life is in a real mess. Everything seems to be falling apart all at once, and I can't catch a break. I reached out to Vince thinking that maybe he could help me out in some way, but he's not responded. I thought he might be able to help me out, accommodate me, or at least offer some support, but he's nowhere to be found. He hasn't reached out since everything fell apart. It's like he just disappeared, like I was nothing to him. I trusted him, and now I see him for what he truly is, manipulative and deceitful. I can't believe I ever let him into my life. I never should have let him into my life, let alone let him ruin everything I had. He abandoned me when I needed help the most. I was stupid to think he'd ever care about me beyond what he could use me for. I feel disgusted that I ever thought Vince could be an option, but now with nowhere to go I'm left to on top of that. I'm now forced to fend for myself, which is making matters worse. I'm starting to think that my husband Mark might have had something to do with me losing my job. He's connected, and I know he knows people who have influence over my career, including my boss. It just seems too convenient that I would get fired out of nowhere for something that. I was called in for a meeting and told my performance was low. I've always been a hard worker, and my performance has never been in question before. It feels like a setup, like Mark's way of punishing me. Beyond just ending our marriage, as if being homeless and abandoned by everyone isn't enough, now I'm also unemployed. I've been trying to reach out to Mark to talk, but he's ignoring me. No calls, no texts, nothing. It's like I don't even exist to him anymore. On top of that, he's told everyone about my affair. Now, everyone knows about my infidelity, including friends, family, and coworkers. My parents are really upset about this. They're very conservative and they've disowned me. They say I'm going to hell and that I've committed an unforgivable sin. They've cut all ties with me and my siblings. They want nothing to do with me. I'm practically an outcast. They say that cheating was bad enough, but that prank was utter cruelty. Mark told them about the prank to garner to get extra sympathy. I'm sure it's terrifying how fast in just a few weeks, my life has gone from having a home, a job, and a marriage to being homeless, jobless, and hated by my family. I'm completely alone, ranting to strangers on the internet because I have nowhere else to turn. How did I mess up this badly? Where did I go wrong? I feel like I'm drowning and there's no one left to pull me out. I don't know what to do anymore. Update. Hey Reddit, I get it. You all hate me. I know you think I'm a terrible person, but I've heard it all before. I'm already living in a nightmare, so please stop reminding me of it. I was right about my husband being involved in my getting fired. I called him today, but I didn't record the call because, in my state, it's illegal to do that without permission. I didn't even think to record it because my brain is a complete mess right now. Anyway, my husband called me asking where I was because apparently I'm about to be served with divorce papers. I told him my location, and then we started talking. I just couldn't hold it in anymore and confronted him about my job loss. Guess what? He admitted he had a hand in it. He didn't even try to deny it. I couldn't believe it when he told me he'd had a hand in getting Steve fired too. I didn't even know Steve was unemployed until he said so. I was really shocked and I told my husband off, calling him all kinds of names. But he just said I deserved everything for cheating on him and for playing such a cruel prank about his mum when I asked him how he found out. I was really surprised when he told me that he knew we were behind the prank. I don't know how he found out, but he did. I asked Vince if it was true, and he said it was. He's been laid off. He was really angry when I told him my husband had a hand in it. Vince started going on a rant, saying he was going to confront Mark. He said he was going to do all kinds of crazy things. Maybe even get I don't think the police are involved, but I know my husband is just talking. Vince is all bark and no bite. What evidence does he even have? He talks big, but I don't see him actually doing anything about it. Let's be real. Vince was lazy when we were together. His bosses probably had plenty of reasons to let him go. My husband probably just sped up the inevitable. Meanwhile, I'm at my breaking point. I've been begging my parents to let me come home. I've told them I'll do whatever they want. I'll go back to church, get baptized, repent, never cheat again. Whatever it takes to get off the streets. I'm tired of couch hopping. I look like a damn hobo at this point and I'm flat out of cash. I haven't even eaten a proper meal in days. I don't know how my life spiraled so quickly. One minute I had a home, a marriage, a job, and now this. I honestly don't know what to do anymore. Every day is a struggle. I'm just trying to get through one day at a time, even that is tough. Many of you have been in touch asking for an update, so I thought I'd give you a quick update on what's been going on. I'm still looking for a place to stay with friends and asking them to let me stay with them. It's been tough, but thankfully my mom seems to be softening a bit. She's been calling more often. I think she might be trying to convince my dad to let me come back home. I've been pleading with them, telling them that my actions were a mistake, and that I was under some kind of devilish influence. I'm truly remorseful and won't repeat my mistakes. It seems like they're buying into my apologies and might be considering taking me back in. I'm also still job hunting, which is proving to be incredibly difficult. The job market is pretty tough right now, and it seems like finding a decent position is almost impossible. Every day is a battle and I'm starting to lose hope. I've been served with divorce papers. This isn't a bad dream or a joke. It's real. The man I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with has completely cut me out. It's been a week of numbness for me. I don't know how to feel or react. I don't think I've fully processed it yet. I've processed everything, but I'm still feeling emotionally exhausted and detached. It's ironic, really. Vince is also struggling to find a job, despite being highly skilled in a field where jobs are usually plentiful. He's hitting walls everywhere. Vince thinks that Mark might be sabotaging his job prospects. It sounds outlandish, but considering Mark's connections and influence, it's not entirely impossible. Vince reached out to me complaining. Vince was ranting about his situation, but I couldn't bring myself to care when I needed support the most. He abandoned me without a second thought. So why should I listen to him now or offer him any sympathy? That's where I'm at right now, still struggling, still feeling the weight of my mistakes and trying to navigate through this mess. Thanks for all the support and messages, even if they are a bit harsh. Update: I haven't updated in a while. Life has been pretty hectic and I've had a lot to deal with, which is why I've been putting off posting. It feels like I'm closing a chapter, and it's hard to find the words, so here it is: the divorce is finalized. Mark and I are officially done. It's surreal and heartbreaking to think that the end of our marriage seemed to bring him relief. Was I really that awful? I know I made mistakes, like the prank. It was inexcusable. It's just hard to deal with how final everything feels. In terms of the legal stuff, I didn't get any spousal support or assets. Cheating is a serious issue in my state and it severely impacted my rights. We didn't meet the time requirements for spousal support or any financial settlements, so I walked away with nothing. It's a hard pill to swallow, especially given the emotional storm I'm dealing with. On the brighter side, my mom managed to convince my dad to let me move back in with them. I moved in about a month ago, so my life has changed a lot. I now have to go to church with them every Sunday and get baptized. The church activities aren't as bad as I thought they'd be, so I'm trying to stay positive and find I'm trying to get into a new routine, and I'm slowly adjusting to being back at home. I'm still looking for a job, and it's been tough. I've heard rumors that Mark might have used his influence to make it difficult for people to find work here. It's a small town, and given his connections, I wouldn't put it past him. As for Vince, he's left. Despite his skills, he couldn't find any work in the town and became increasingly paranoid about Mark's supposed interference with mounting bills and no income. He finally decided to leave. I'm relieved he's gone. Rebuilding my life is a slow process, but at least I'm not homeless anymore. I'm also trying to rebuild my relationship with my siblings. It's not easy, but I'm making progress. I'm focusing on moving forward and finding stability again. Thanks for all the support and advice, it means a lot.